we'll start with a review discussion on 2019 annual reports for tax increment districts.
Yes, everybody should receive the, I guess, goldenrod covered page here at City Hall and via email, and it's a team effort that puts this together. Kelly Nyforth, Mark Lyons, and our finance department all put this information together. We have all the existing TIF districts that are still current, up to number 35, I believe, Oshkosh Avenue redevelopment and the Oshkosh Corporation Global Headquarters. Those are the new TIF districts that we added. I don't know if your intent would be to review each and every TIF that we have in existence, or highlights, or what's your pleasure?
Why don't you start with just the highlights and then see if any of the review board wants to ask questions about ones that you didn't highlight.
Sounds good. Probably the most significant TIFs are the ones that we created just recently out on Oshkosh Avenue for Oshkosh Corp. That should be kind of near the end of the report. That would be for TIF 34 and TIF 35. If you recall, we created 2 TIF districts as part of the Oshkosh Corp development, and TIF 34 was for the Oshkosh Corporation Global Headquarters District, and that is just the parcel that Oshkosh Corp acquired from the city. That is what we've based the PAYGO calculations on for the development incentive that we provided Oshkosh Corporation. We'll be doing our first PAYGO payment later this year, and we'll be figuring out that PAYGO payment sometime around August, September, as part of the budget for next year. But some of the highlights, you can, if you want to flip it to the page 120, you can see that the increment is up to 10 million. I expect that's going to increase because that was only partial development value for the Oshkosh headquarters, because they started mid-year of 2017 and then 2018, and then 1/1 of 2019 it was only partially complete. We'll expect a full build out here for 1/1 of 20, and that'll show up in next year's report. My expectation is we're going to exceed the $18 million that was the minimum assessment that we were expecting out of this project. And TIF 35 is the one that we created to support the infrastructure that went into building Westfield and extending Keller and making some improvements at the roundabout and the Westfield Oshkosh Ave intersection. That one has had some development around it. We're hoping for more as time goes by. If you've been by Oshkosh Ave recently, you can see not only has the Casey's been built, but now they're under construction with 2 other buildings out along the frontage. The new office building and the commercial building. And we're hoping the hotel actually starts construction later this year. The developer reports he'll be selling that in the very near future, and we've reviewed the plans for the hotel. So we're expecting that hotel project to start sometime later this year is my expectation. Is there anything to add, Ms. Nyforth, here?
Nope. Yeah, the First National Bank too in that area, and then U-Haul made some improvements also, which will add increment to that district.
And at this point, the general development plan's been approved for the whole site, and some specific implementation plans are coming in for TIF 35.
Correct, yeah, they've got some specific implementation plans that have now been approved for the hotel, the retail building, the office building, and now they're starting to work on more potential options for that area around the hotel.
Alan, in both those TIFs, you don't make any assumptions, even though you reference them, you don't make any assumptions about growth in the tax increment.
That is correct.
It's really the value, that first column is really value increment, correct?
Depending on the chart, you have to read them. They're all a little different depending on how much room finance has for each chart. Some of them show value, some of them actually show the TIF increment and the TIF amount. Probably the TIF amount is the column that matters the most.
True tax increment,
Yep.
yeah. But I guess the question is, we don't make any projections. You made the statement that Oshkosh Corp has a minimum value of 18 million.
Correct.
And so we don't make any assumptions about that, even though that's written into our agreement.
No, when it comes to these particular sheets, the finance department prepares these and uses the existing value and projects that into the future and adjusts it every year. So this gets updated every year, not only for the city budget, but for the Joint Review Board review as well.
Because next year, I mean, some of the numbers I saw, they're going to exceed 18 million.
Yes.
That's a minimum contractual require, but it's going to be, I think, well over 20.
Yes. That's our expectation as well.
Okay. And then the value increment with 35 is really Bank One and a little bit Casey's, right?
Right.
There really isn't much more there right now.
Well.
There's a building going on, there's a structure right by Casey's.
Yes, that's
That's the
the
office building.
office building.
There's
Yeah.
an office building, then there's supposed to be a commercial Dunkin' Donuts, which is,
Yes.
Right, yep.
Right to the east of the Casey's.
That's not part of the 369 is
No.
really just Casey's and Bank First.
Yes.
right, yeah, there's,
But we're-
I'm just saying,
more
there is
growth.
construction going on.
Yeah. Well, there was a lot of rumors out there that with the bridge being closed, with the Oshkosh Avenue Bridge being closed, that somehow we're gonna put the roundabout in over there, and it's like, we never said we were putting a roundabout in. In fact, that would be the last thing that you'd wanna put there, but, well, why didn't they wait until the construction, to open up the bridge? And it's like, the construction isn't gonna occur until this sheet on page 125 starts generating significant tax increment. But, I mean, we're on our way to it, it's just that it's gonna take a few years, so.
And just to follow up on the roundabout was not chosen for that intersection. The
In fact, it was
Sawyer,
recommended-
Oshkosh,
it
they
was
they
recommended
recommended
against.
against it, exactly.
I think you told us at prior meetings that one of the problems you would have if you put a roundabout there is that traffic would be backed up from the lift bridge,
Yes.
which
Exactly.
could cause a roundabout to become deadlocked. And I've seen that before where no one could move because the roundabout was full and no one could get to the exit they wanted. So it's a good thing that you're not doing that.
Yeah, and I think we just have to keep quelling that rumor because that's just factually never gonna happen. So anyway, okay, thanks, Alan.
So from my perspective, those were the highlights for the new TIF districts. I'd be happy to answer any questions about our industrial TIFs or the redevelopment TIFs that we've adopted downtown.
Maybe if you could just quickly summarize three things. Those that are in deep trouble, those that are
Okay.
doing fantastically, and those that are about to close.
Good job, Bert. I like that.
Let's see.
But that's not too many, but those are the
One-
ones that are,
The ones we used to have in deep trouble, say 20 and 21 and 13, those are Marion Road and the South Shore. Those aren't in trouble anymore because we used TIF 7 to pay off those project costs, so they should be actually closing with a little increment left to distribute to the other taxing jurisdictions. So those used to be three problem
Right.
TIFs from my perspective. Another one I don't like right now is the aviation business park. We don't have any
I
development.
had a particular question on
Yep.
that. Anything can happen now.
Yep, we don't have any development, and TIF 23 is where our transload site is located, north of the railroad tracks out in the southwest industrial park. We didn't have any development in that until just this last year, where we at least sold some land to Illinois Cement, and we're in the process of selling some land to Lycon, and Watco is planning on exercising an option for about another 10 acres of land out there. So we're expecting TID 23 to come around much more quickly. The aviation business park is still a thorn in my side because it's hard to attract businesses in that location.
I'm sure not having EAA here
Will
this
hurt.
year will not help.
Yes.
Right.
Yep. It is good that the county is building the taxiway, at least that's the last I've heard, into the county's portion of the aviation business park.
Is there a projected completion date on that people can use to sell property in the park itself?
I don't know that off the top of my head.
The plan is not to construct the entire taxiway, but to construct the first section. That would probably give you two very large or maybe three smaller lots that could access that nub. Once we have one tenant that requires a taxiway to operate in the business park, we can then get the funding from the BOA and from the FAA to complete the taxiway, as well as get reimbursement for the nub that we put in to a large extent.
We got a little bit of chicken and the egg then.
Absolutely. Their initial reaction was, until we had a tenant that could prove that they needed the taxiway, they weren't going to support it initially. And of course, you can't get a tenant that's dependent on having the taxiway until you have it. But the county is putting money in to get the first nub in there, and that will allow us then to probably get a tenant in there, although the aviation industry is severely, severely depressed right now.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Since Oshkosh Corp. TID 24, just about all our TIFs have been PAYGO-related TIFs, so that's really switched the risk from the community to the developer. And most of these PAYGO TIFs, the city's been doing well. I guess I'd highlight the arena project. Been a lot of things about the arena, but the city's never really been in a bad position because that's never been any money the city's been out. That's all future funds that needs to be paid before it can go out as PAYGO. So I expect that'll continue into the future. Same with the granary, Washington building, beach building. The Morgan district, we haven't had much development in the Morgan district, so that's the clock is ticking on the Morgan district. That's probably been 5 years, and we haven't had any development. That's kind of dictated by the developer, and that'll probably be a PAYGO-related project, but we've already put the Riverwalk through, so that's been completed at this point in time. So at least from the city's improvements, we've done what we needed to do with that one. And then the other PAYGO projects with the hotel annex, the granary, I'd say that all those are operating as we expected. Since they're PAYGOs, they'll be getting what they've earned as part of the PAYGO.
Could you also comment on the projects that are not included in here?
Oh, sure.
Those are the ones that are
We've
of
been
most
busy.
interest, particularly my friends from Merge.
We've been
I
busy.
want to see where we are on that, but,
Yes.
oh, really, all 4 of them.
The RDA has sold all 3 parcels to Merge. They've applied for their building plan review, and that was approved. I think they still need some final engineering work done on the site plan, which they're getting close to getting approved. Is that correct, Ms. Nyforth?
That is correct. I believe they're looking at an early July groundbreaking for the
Originally it was
parcel
gonna be
H.
May, and then it was gonna be June, and now
Yeah.
it's
July.
Right.
July.
We've been following them. This is not an issue of us
Okay.
being left out. There were some things that they were specifically working on and we've been working closely with them. This is not any mysterious delay. They're ready to go.
Just want to make sure, because we have a lot of local money in a future tied to that. And we don't have a good history of outside developers on that area down there. If you go back historically, our development there has been from local people, and all of our external people going all the way back to the amusement park and the water park through the Tommy Thompson years.
Oh, yeah.
Project.
You're dating yourself there, Burke. Wow.
But I mean, it's all external. Everybody has come in external. I don't think we've had a successful external developer in that area, have we?
Well, Annex is there
Annex.
right now.
Okay, so they're,
I mean, there's some outside investment that has come in.
And the
Okay.
thing about Merge is they switched parcel priorities from the one on the water, which we call parcel J, to parcel H, which is the one
Right.
up where the food co-op wants to go at Pearl and Jackson. So we had to go through a whole amendment process to change the order of the projects.
Well, we put an incentive in there, or a disincentive, I should say. If they don't deliver, their percent return is going to be significantly less. And that was something that staff put in there as a way to ensure that they're still in the game.
that's good.
I
What-
think you went from 25 down to 15% if they don't perform.
Correct.
What's the projection for the second building now?
The second building, the development agreement calls, they have to start that one, I want to say, in next year.
2021,
And then the third one is like 2 years after that.
2023.
Yeah.
And they have until 2025 to
25.
complete.
To finish all three
All
of them.
phases.
Yeah. So we did a little bit of an extension, and that was with the market and everything.
And that's why we thought it was important to lower their incentive. It's kind of a carrot and a stick, that if you only do one, your pay-go is reduced by 40%.
And then if they do two, it's
Back up to 20%, so it's a
20%.
20% haircut.
so they have to do all three to get the full benefit that they initially asked for.
Yep.
But Aviation Plaza, where are we on? Looks like the building's going up
Yeah.
fast.
Yes, in fact, the mine shaft did an addition already.
Yep, they added on to their original project that they had approved, last year, so.
By
They're
putting in a bakery.
a bakery for the restaurant, yes.
Right.
And the Extreme Customs doing their work.
They're
and
doing well,
A lot
yep.
of the work is in the parking lot, looks complete.
Yep. Mhm.
So we're expecting mine shaft to open in later this summer, correct?
Yes.
Super. Anything new on Pioneer?
I'm not sure I have anything new for Pioneer. Have you heard anything, Mr.
Well, there
Rowell?
always seems to be something new. I think they're entertaining 2 proposals for the north side of the island, but that's really all we know right now. And I don't think Art's ready to move on the marina and the restaurant and that until he knows where the other one is,
The
but
marina's not moving forward at this point?
I've heard he is getting his permit to add a fourth pier on the south side of the marina where he has some open water.
He's also working to shore up the bridge
Oh,
that
yes.
enters the main island side.
That's- Last one's Cabrini.
Cabrini got their tax credits, and they're in the process of, well, I think we're starting to work on a development agreement that has to go to council before any kind of pay-go payment is agreed to. But that's all based on a pay-go.
Thank you.
And maybe the last paragraph in this NIFORth, we're at 4.2%, which is well below the statutory maximum of 12% value cap. So I've been told that Oshkosh has become known as a micro TIF community. We do one parcel at a time. We don't do big districts anymore. We're one parcel at a time TIF. We've kind of earned that reputation over the last few years.
Is that a compliment?
It's probably a compliment, but it's a backhanded compliment, probably.
one of the downsides, and that was the first thing that Russ, when Russ Van Gompel, our new finance director, came in, he was questioning about that, because one of the downsides of doing the micro TIFs is the inefficiency of administrative costs, because you have to do, you just have to put more in. But as we learned from some of the larger TIF areas, such as 21
and 20.
Yeah, we did so large, and then the many productive years of the TIF go away while maybe one project gets done and the other ones don't get done, and then they only have limited life. This way, as long as the planning aspects of TIF are looked at, is this consistent with the master plan for the comprehensive plan? As long as you're following the planning version of it, you can get away with doing it in smaller chunks as long as you're consistent. I think the Sawdust District Plan is part of that, having that plan out there so that as we do it, we can look at it and say, is what's being proposed consistent with the Sawdust Plan? And I think then, some of the next ones that might come along might be on the west side of South Main.
Mhm.
That might be a potential TIF there.
And just to follow up on your point, I believe in the past, the city, once they adopted the Sawdust Plan, would have TIFed the entire area, one big TIF. I think it's gonna be a series of individual TIFs as development justifies the participation for the implementation of that plan. So hopefully the city will not be taking as big a risk as we did in 20 and 21. It'll be managed more closely with the micro TIFs.
Thank you, thank you.
But it's more work.
Yes, it is. It is more work.
Alan, how about some of the other successful ones, like around city center and that, because
Oh.
they've been generating some. We
Uh,
don't have the
did-
Southwest Business Park like we used to.
Yes.
That was the mothership of all TIFs.
But the rest of them did 10, 12, 14, 15, 17. They've all been successful. We expect they'll all finish in the black. I think the next one we'd be terminating is 2023.
Yeah.
And there'd be some distributions to the other taxing jurisdictions at that point. I want to say that's probably TIF number 10.
Yeah.
Sorry, TIF 11, 2022.
Just one other particular building I just happen to think of. What about in the South Shore, the old Buckstaff building, the big white thing that's on corner of 9th and Main?
The Menominee Nation Arena?
No,
Miles Kimball.
up the street.
Miles
the old-
Kimball.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, Miles Kimball. Ninth
The
and
white thing
Main.
that's been
Oh,
through.
yes. That's actually gone through a transaction recently. It had been with developer originally,
Yes, sir.
Brian Burns. He sold
Right.
it to
Smart IT.
Will Steiner. And now he's sold that to potentially
There,
selling
yeah,
that to
looking at
another
another
developer.
transaction, perhaps another developer might be interested
Mhm.
in developing that building.
I guess, are there any more items, questions on specific tax increment districts? And we can move on to the next item, which is a COVID update.
Yes, thank you. Greater Oshkosh EDC has been administering the COVID-19 funds for the city, and I believe partially for the county as well.
That's correct.
And they're a few $100,000 into loans to businesses in Oshkosh. Based on their feedback at this point, they're not expecting us to get up to the kind of the maximum we've allowed as part of the transfers that we did between the other TIF districts to TIF 16, as well as our RLF. So one thing we've been kicking around at staff is a disadvantaged business enterprise program. We've been looking at ways to help entrepreneurs and other business establishments start in Oshkosh, especially the startups and disadvantaged businesses. They're giving us some good feedback as to what they're seeing on the street right now. I expect Greater Oshkosh EDC and the city staff will be proposing some kind of program sometime later this summer that we would probably ask the Joint Review Board back just so we could explain the new program, kind of like the COVID-19 fund. And if this program comes to pass, we'd come to you to make sure you guys would be in support of using TIF funds for, if we don't spend it all for COVID-19, to slice off a part of it for disadvantaged business enterprises that we're working on right now. So you might be called back later this summer to entertain that resolution, because we'd certainly want your support before we take that to our various council and Go EDC board.
Looking at in terms of grants or loans.
Well, city funds, we'd want that to be loans, because that's money that would come back to you. But we're working with Greater Oshkosh EDC to figure out what we can do with some state funds through WEDC, a Capital Catalyst Fund, potentially, as well as our CDBG CARES Act funding that we got in addition to our regular funding, that can be loaned out as a forgiven loan, so it almost acts as a grant.
grant.
Yep, so
What
we're
we're
still
doing.
working on the details of those two different sources for potential grant or forgivable loan programs. This part, I still think the TIF funds would be loan program. And if there's one thing we've learned, startups and entrepreneurs, sometimes they will not be successful. Go EDC's been very good at selecting investments up to this point, and we've never had a default. We don't have any defaults under COVID-19 at this point in time. But as you take more and more startups into consideration, the early start entrepreneurs, we could have some of those loans default. So we'll talk about that once we have a better sense of who would be our target businesses for that type of thing.
Yeah, we're suspecting within the next couple months, we're gonna have pretty good handle on how much all of our loans through all these programs will be, and then we can start, talk about where we wanna redirect it. It's not taking any extra money out of the TIFs, it's money that this body has already authorized, and can we put it to some more productive uses and some social, address some social issues as well. So, if you're interested in entertaining that, I think there's some possibilities of working with other programs that are already around, whether it's a small business development center or some of the tax programs. We have to make sure that we help these businesses get off to a good start, and we don't have a tool for that right now, and we're trying to figure out the right way to do it. Grants with our money don't make a lot of sense, but if we can leverage our money for them to get grants or a forgivable loan somewhere else, then we'd be happy to help.
And our regular,
And as you point, provide some resource help, increase it.
yes.
Is there
possibility of
success? Yeah, it's not just
Some
giving
sort
them
of a
money
program.
and blindly giving them, it's making sure that they're using the resource. We've got incredible resources between technical colleges, E-Seed program, SBDC at the university. We've got all these resources. Can we throw some money into that in addition to the technical resources? So I think it's something we need to consider.
And it's one area we don't fund right now. Right now, for our regular RLF, you have to be in business 2 years. We lowered that to 1 year for the COVID-19, and talking to Greater Oshkosh EDC, the startups are still a problem, and the early start programs, those are less than a year old. So we'll want to talk to you more about those. That's
think
all
that's
I
all we
had
have
for
on that
number
one.
3, yes. And we kind of covered number 4.
Yeah, the tax increment district update, you've already
Yep.
pretty much covered unless anybody else has a question they've saved for this point.
Well, we might have new TIFs coming up later this year. You never know.
Well,
But you wouldn't see those in the report for probably another year and a half.
since that's already been covered, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
We stand adjourned.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Amy.